Good morning. Let's call to order the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Executive Committee meeting of Friday, May 24th at 10:04 a.m. Before we get started, I know that Director Meadows has a statement.
Indeed, I do. I wanted to inform everybody that I am appearing remotely pursuant to AB 2449 under the Just Cause provision because I am unable to attend in person due to a contagious illness. No other individual 18 years or older is present in the room at my remote location, and I will stay on video, unfortunately.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and move to roll call. May we please have roll call?
Chair Klein.
Present.
Vice Chair Mekachuk.
Present.
Director Tyson.
Here.
Director Walia.
Here.
Director Martinez-Beltran.
Here.
Meadows.
Here.
We have a quorum of our committee.
Thank you. We'll move to public comment on matters not listed on today's agenda. Public can now comment on matters not listed on our agenda today. Speakers will have 3 minutes to speak. Is there anyone who wishes to speak? No one in the room here. Anyone in Morgan Hill who wishes to speak?
No, just the chair.
Just checking. Thank you. We'll close public comment and move to our consent calendar. Are there any changes to our consent calendar to approve the minutes of April 26, 2024? No changes? Is there any public comment on our consent calendar? No member of the public wishing to speak remotely?
No hands raised.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
Second.
Thank you, Director Tyson. May we please have a roll call vote?
Yes, thank you. Chair Klein.
Yes.
Vice Chair Mekachuk.
Aye.
Director Tyson.
Yes.
Walia. Aye. Meadows.
Yes.
Martinez-Beltran.
Yes.
Carries unanimously.
Thank you. We'll move to our general calendar items. First up is a CEO report.
Yeah, so I don't have much to report today. I know we have a few things on the agenda that are going to take some time, so I'm going to keep it really brief. I just wanted to report that there's a team that was formed here at SVCE to look at office space solutions. And so we've set up kind of one to figure out what we could do in the very near term, and then another one to figure out what we can do longer term. Because our lease here expires in about a year from, I think, September, October. So the board had previously kind of set aside, I want to say it like set aside with quotes, some money to look at procuring a new space, a building. And that seems to be quite a challenge for us to find something that would be suitable and within our price range. So we're also looking at leasing opportunities as well, long midterm leasing opportunities. So our intent is to come back to the board before we formalize the budget for FY 24-25 with kind of our strategy and get some input from the executive committee and then the board. And so I just wanted to give you an update on that at this point, buying is not our first priority. So just want to let you know that in case there was any concerns with that. Aside from that, just wanted to let you know that in terms of me being onboarded, my first 90 days, things are going well. I mean, work continues. We've had some personal things happen here at SVCE, so dealing with that as well. And but other than that, things are going very well. Thank you.
Congratulations on your first 90 days.
No, it's only been, it hasn't been 90 yet. I'm still in the.
That's true.
It's only been 30.
Yeah, it's only 30 days, 35.
Maybe close to 60.
April and May.
Yeah.
April, May, 60 days.
Yeah, we've got it. Halfway there, I think about the halfway mark.
It's all a big blur in my mind, so thank you. Any comments, questions from the board? Open up to the public. Anyone remote?
No hands raised.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Monica. We'll now move to item number 3, authorized payments for the California Community Choice Association and California Community Power membership costs. We will have Zach Liskey speaking, Deputy Director of Power Resources. Zach?
Alrighty, great. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I believe Andrea has maybe a slide we can put on this screen.
Maybe before we go, 'cause I think the slide goes right to the recommendation. Zach, so maybe we'll provide a little bit of context first, and I can start, and then Zach, you can certainly chime in as well. Unfortunately, Mike Callahan, our new general counsel who helped prepare some of this information, has some scheduled time off this week, so he's not here. But as most of you are aware, SVCE belongs to two major agencies, one being CalCCA, California Community Choice Aggregator Association. They are kind of our advocacy group. They do a lot of regulatory and legislative advocacy for us and some analysis type work as well. And we are founding members of CalCCA, so we joined back in 2017, the board allowed us, gave us the authority to join that association. And as a member of that association, the CEO serves on their board. It's not a Brown Active board like ours that we have here, but I now serve on that board. And one of the obligations we have on that board is to approve budgets. And so that's the first one. The second one is California Community Power, CC Power, which was formed, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago. We had a big role in forming that Joint Powers Authority. And they were formed really to help do some joint procurement of resources, power supply, and other services on behalf of the members who participate in that. And I think there's 9 of us now. And one of the obligations that we have at CC Power is also to have a board, and that is a public board because they make procurement decisions, unlike CalCCA. And the CEO also serves on that board, and one of the obligations there is to approve budgets as well. And so Mike Callahan and Zach have done the technical analysis to determine like what have the past budgets been and what are the future looking budgets. And as for on the one hand, but also how do we approve those budgets, right? And so I asked them both to look at it very objectively and see, did the CEO or does the CEO have the authority to approve budgets and therefore spend money at these two agencies? And their conclusion is in the staff report, and I support it 100%, is that it doesn't seem clear that the CEO actually had the authority to approve those budgets without having come to the board first. If we look at it purely from was our CalCCA and CC Power a vendor, like we have under our purchasing authority, then those budgets exceeded $100,000 and therefore should have come to the board before we approved them. If we look at it in the context of, are they special agencies, and at the time that the board approved our participation in there, did they approve some general authority? We could not find that either. And so to be conservative, we're asking 2 things, and Zach can certainly answer any questions on a more objective basis. I'm being as objective as I can as well, by the way, on what that looks like. But we're asking to ratify past budgets for both agencies, and we're asking to approve their fiscal year 25 budget, which for those 2 agencies starts in July 2025, or 2024 and goes through June 2024. So that's the backdrop of this whole thing, and certainly ask any questions that you might.
Any questions?
You got it.
Okay.
There's a slide.
Yeah, there's right.
There. Thank you. I will open it up to the public. Any comments? Anyone remote?
Yeah, we have to restart.
I just have,
Sure.
we lost the slide.
Yeah, you want me to put it, I had to check the.
Go ahead.
I just appreciate you bringing it to the exec committee, and also it's good to have Michael on board as we are looking in-house at everything more closely. So, thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah, we appreciate his support on this too.
And it's these organizations which are still somewhat in the infancy. We were founding members, but I think are critical across California, whether or not it's procurement or advocacy. I think we have such common issues, and it's trying to make sure that we're seeing eye to eye, and we have the power of a larger voice as opposed to just Silicon Valley Clean Energy being out there and saying, this is what we want or what we can do. So happy to see this come back to us to make sure that we're officially approving this and, setting that in the right direction. Thank you.
Can I make a motion?
Sure. Question or comment?
As I'm reflecting on this, I thought you said we're approving prior payments as well,
Oh,
that we're ratifying.
the past budgets, yeah.
And I don't see that in here unless I missed it. Oh, or approve and ratify such payments for all fiscal years.
It's not showing
Okay.
the dollars, but yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
that's it.
Okay, I will support this motion.
Okay.
So
Director
I'd
Malaya?
like to move staff's recommendation for.
I just had a comment, Chair.
Oh,
I
yes.
just wanted,
Go ahead, Director.
thank you. I just wanted to definitely voice my support for this as the legislative chair. I mean, Cal CCA is really our legislative arm and they do tons of advocacy for us. It was really apparent when we were up there and Tina and I went. And so I think this is an absolute, but I do very much appreciate you bringing this to the board, Monica.
Thank you.
The motion's already there.
Thank you.
I'll
Motion.
second.
Thank you, Vice Chair. With that, please conduct a roll call vote.
Chair Klein,
Yes?
Vice Chair Mekachev,
Aye.
Director Tyson,
Yes.
Director Walia,
Aye.
Director Martinez Beltran,
Hi.
Meadows.
Aye.
Carries unanimously.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 4, 2025 Clean Power Supply Recommendation Offerings. And Chris Van Vactor, Director of Power Resources. Chris will be speaking.
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Good morning, everyone. All right, so we're here to talk about our 2025 Clean Power offering. So we're going to go over SVCE's product offerings. We're going to discuss continued challenges we're seeing in the carbon-free energy procurement for 2025, and then we'll request support recommendation to the board to relax the 100% carbon-free target for 2025. So I think everyone knows this, but it's always good to go over. We offer 3 products at SVCE. The bulk of our customers are in Green Start. This is a mostly clean product, 78 to 85% clean. We also offer Green Prime, which is a premium product, which is 100% renewable. And we also provide Green Prime Direct to select commercial and industrial customers. This is the product mix for Green Start and Green Prime. As we mentioned earlier, Green Start is 78 to 85% clean. Green Prime is 100% renewable. Just kind of drilling into the specifics on a customer basis, Green Start's around 95% of the retail load. Green Prime's around 5%. Next slide, please. So in November 2024, we came to the board to relax the Green Start clean target for this year, 2024. I say 24 November, I meant November 23. Anyway, the parameters were to continue to see carbon-free resources within budget for the calendar year of 2024. We got approval to procure nuclear carbon-free resources if the allocations from PG&E were not available and sufficient volume was available to achieve 100% clean below budget. If those resources were not available, we would adjust 100% clean goal for 2024 to our current position, approximately 78% clean. So we have not been able to find those resources for this year. And our latest estimate for 24 is around 80% clean. And that's just due to the fluctuation of our assets, right? They're intermittent resources. Next slide. So the market conditions that led to 2024 still exist. it would still cost, it would, for 2025, it would cost tens of millions of dollars to fill our clean position for Green Start if we were to procure up to 100%. So finding, and additionally finding that supply just, it remains a challenge. And just kind of going over what's kind of going on in the market. The RECs and carbon-free attributes are still at record high levels. In 3 years, market prices have increased sixfold, signifying a dramatic rebalancing of supply and demand. Recent RFOs and market surveys have confirmed that carbon-free attributes are a scarce resource. Large hydro out of the Pacific Northwest that normally provides carbon-free to California is in extreme high demand and no supply. However, the Northwest is undergoing a multi-year drought. Hydro allocations from Pacific Gas and Electric are highly uncertain. And to this statement, I'll say this is after the calendar year 2027. PG&E recently came out and confirmed they will provide hydro allocations from 2025 to 2027. So that's good news in the short run, but in the long run, it's still an uncertain resource. SVCE's nuclear allocation from D'Angelo Canyon will be reduced from what we historically had. So we didn't have it in 2024, but we are receiving those attributes again in 2025 at 50% of what we previously received it at. And this is just due to the recent legislation that came out. And we were unable to find affordable nuclear attributes. Next slide. So here are our options. Option one is we could go back to providing 100% carbon-free for 2025. This would put our PCL label at 74 pounds of carbon emissions. And I'll go through the slide and then I have a little good news about Geo that we can talk about. This would return SVCE to its historic product offering. The drawbacks are this is really hard to do. It's unlikely. And if we could do it, it would be really expensive. And then in the long run, it doesn't reduce overall emissions from the grid. Option two would be to stick with our current carbon-free position of 78 to 85% in 2025. This does assume getting PG&E large hydro allocations and a lower amount of Diablo Canyon. Reportable emissions on the PCL would be around 170 pounds of carbon dioxide. The benefits of this would be lower costs, right? It would help maintain SVCE reserves and provide discounts and or program funding. So the drawback here is could create concern from customers, especially Green Start, with climate action plans. So we did get some good news earlier this year. We should see a change to our PCL under our portfolio starting in 2026. Most of our emissions on the PCL are from COSO, a geo resource, and that's going to be excluded from 2026 on. So that's pretty good.
That was a result of direct advocacy on behalf of SVCE, Central Coast Community, and we worked with some municipal utilities in Southern California who also have a lot of geothermal in their portfolio. So it was a big win for us to get them to recognize that this is a clean resource and that it's confusing to the consumer to have to list so much emissions.
Next slide. So outlook and next steps. So our ability to achieve the 100% clean target through short term will continue to be a challenge. So we plan on coming back to the board for clean targets for 26 to 2030 as part of our IRP and 2045 pathway to carbon neutral discussion. In that discussion, we'll reassess, or leading up to that discussion, we'll reassess Green Star and Green Prime offerings holistically with consideration for findings from above analysis, including product value proposition, cost allocation, hedging, and price premium. We expect to come to XCOM or the executive committee and or the board in August, September, so that end of summer, early fall timeframe. And so then staff recommends, the executive committee recommend the board approve the following for 2025. Continue to seek carbon-free resources with board parameters approved for 2024 for calendar year 2025. If carbon-free resources are not available and or the cost is not within budget, adjust 100% clean target for 2025 to current position of 78 to 85% clean, depending on carbon-free allocations from PG&E, which we should get this year for 25. For fiscal year 24 to 25, proposed operating budget, assume 85% clean position, or to consider budget in September 2020. So I think we're at the question portion.
Yes, Vice Chair.
What are our cohort doing, for lack of a better term, with this? Like, are we the first ones that are considering this? Do we have any intel on what's going on? And what's our messaging going to be? Have we thought that through?
I can take a stab at it, Chris. So we have someone in our audience here today who tracks us very closely, and he looks at all the power content labels for all of the CCAs, and I think the IOUs as well, and does a nice summary every year about what each of the product offerings for each of the CCAs are. And there are some that have historically, just like us, had 100% clean offering as a standard product. And there are many who don't either, right? There are many CCAs who just basically do what we call minimum compliance. So whatever the RPS requirement is, that's their product offering, which right now is about 48 to 50% RPS. And then everything else is just, whatever they can find, usually market resources. But I do know, and Chris can attest to this as well, having talked to other CCAs, we're all in the same boat here in terms of the challenges of getting to 100%. The power content label for 2024 will not come out until next year. So we can't tell you for sure what the other CCAs were able to achieve for 2024. But I don't think they have an advantage over us or any kind of ability to procure resources that aren't available to us right now. And so I think we're all going to be seeing less clean portfolios for 24 when we report them on our power content labels next year, just because, again, this Northwest drought has been a real big impact here. And everybody right now, if they haven't met their compliance period for obligations under renewable portfolio standard, that's their number one priority, is to make sure that they get the RPS resources that they need to comply, because this is the last year of compliance. And that's driving up a lot of these costs and issues.
I sense there's other questions, but I'll ask one more, and then I've got a number of comments to make.
Okay.
But my question is, what's the current thinking on extending Diablo Canyon? And I know that, so this is kind of a comment following that question. I know that there's an intense amount of pressure on the cost of power and it being carbon free. So this also dovetails into the Legislative Action Committee and what our messaging is with other CCAs. Can you please answer the question, what about the existing Diablo Canyon operations and extending it?
I think historically SVCE took a fairly large piece of Diablo Canyon as of its portfolio. So we're generally supportive of seeing it come back to the portfolio. It would have been nice to have seen it come in a different route, if that answer makes sense. I think, yeah, I'll just.
Well, just from the big change, the big shift in Diablo Canyon was that it's a PG&E resource. And so it was in the PCIA. And so all the participants in PG&E's portfolio or PCIA were given the opportunity to take the allocations for free, right? And so our board allowed us to take our allocation. But Diablo Canyon was always slated to go offline at the end of 2024. The governor pushed an effort to get Diablo Canyon to extend, both from a reliability perspective, it was needed in California, and also it is a carbon-free resource. But part of that package of what the governor got was that the resource now becomes a system-wide resource. So it's available to all of California, not just PG&E customers. So the current regulatory proceeding around this resource is such that PG&E will continue to give us an allocation, but it'll be a reduced allocation. So it'll be less than what we were getting before. The one big win we got on this is that we're going to get resource adequacy attributes from Diablo Canyon, which we didn't used to get before. So even though we had it in our PCIA and we paid for it, we didn't get to count it towards our reliability obligations. And so that was another big win in the regulatory proceeding, is now we get to count it towards our obligations. And then you all had asked the question of like, how are we messaging this? So we started messaging to our customers about us not being 100% clean on Green Start last year when the board took the action for 2024. And we also expanded at one point we were talking about limiting participation in Green Prime to just those customers who were in it already, because we were having challenges finding the types of products that we needed to support Green Prime as well. But we have relaxed that requirement, and it's open to any new residential or non-commercial any residential customer who wants to join to Green Prime, because Green Prime is 100% clean with 100% renewable resources. So it's a good alternative to Green Start if a customer really wants that. We've had some increase in enrollment, but not a whole lot, quite frankly.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Director Tyson.
And just to build on that, we had quite the discussion a few months ago about what that premium for Green Prime would be. And as I recall, we took sort of a middle path, didn't we? So not entirely all the cost. So we want to make it somewhat attractive, but not too big a drain on the others.
Yeah, and that's part of that longer term effort that we're going to see, because there's different schools of thought on how we should allocate cost to Green Prime. One is it should be based on an average cost of the portfolio for the resources that we have in the portfolio. And then others believe, no, it should be based on marginal price. Whatever it costs to get that incremental amount of cleanness, that's what we should charge to Green Prime customers. So we're doing some analysis around it, some heavy debating around it, and we will come back to the board with the recommendation later this year on the longer term premium for Green Prime. And more importantly, how do we structure Green Prime so that it has its own devoted resources, so that there's less fluctuation and cost and more certainty on the volume and the resource that it serves.
We haven't gotten to my two questions yet. Could you move it back to slide 7?
Sorry.
No.
Okay.
What you said prompted that. That's the way a discussion is supposed to work. So the footnote here, I understand about the 74 pounds of CO2, and that comes from a little CO2 that comes from the geothermal. But what's changing starting in 2026?
So this is the change to the PCL. So in 2026, the COSO resource will not impact our PCL. So we should see a reduction in the number because of that.
But it's a regulatory change to how it's accounted for. It's physically nothing is changing. Correct?
Exactly.
All right, I understand that. And then I look at this number, for instance, number 2, and I say, wow, that doesn't look that bad in terms of the 170 pounds of CO2. And this might be a hard question to say, but if we were only using, let's say, natural gas, and I assume those numbers are per megawatt hour?
No, that's in total. Is it in total, Zach, or is it per megawatt hour?
It's a CO2 equivalent per megawatt hour.
Yeah, it has to be something like that. So if we just use natural gas, what would that number be? Be a big number, right?
Yes.
So you don't need to provide the number now. I
Like
just want
480 something, right? 487, something like that.
It would have to be more than that.
It would rely on the system,
20%,
and the
so-
system has a mix of things.
Yeah.
We would use a system
I would just say, get that number in your back pocket when you're thinking ahead to messaging.
Okay,
That's all my questions.
that's a good point. We never referred to that because we're clean. So
That's a good,
you're right.
that's a good point, yeah. Director Martinez Beltran?
You're on mute, Director Beltran.
Yeah, I think so.
Sorry, I put my hand down. I wanted to see how long do we anticipate, or do we estimate, or do we think that this might be the trend going forward?
I'm looking at,
It depends on how much you think it's going to be in the Pacific Northwest. So I think marketers up in the Northwest they're optimistic. They're optimistic every year. Good year. It's there's a fundamental shift in just how business is being conducted in the West. A lot of this has to do with data center load. The Pacific Northwest and the Desert Southwest are seeing rapid load growth. And so to make this a longer answer than it probably needed to be, in the long run, this could be a permanent change. In the short run, we could see relief in a few years.
yeah, I think just to add some of the other kind of fundamental changes we're seeing in the whole West area is that other states are developing their own clean portfolio standards. That's new in the last few years. And then we've got companies like Microsoft up in Washington area, you know, buying a whole bunch of clean resources with their 24/7 kind of mandate as well. So could be long term.
One of the adverse
Yeah,
impacts.
I mean, those are the indicators that I mean, I'm guessing and seeing, and I'm just wondering, you know, I know that this is a question for today and short term, but I think we need to also be thinking about this messaging. Sounds like it may be a permanent and it may be ongoing. And so I think we need to think about that as we're
Sure. But before, I just want to also insert that, and this is what you're going to learn when we do the pathway to 2045. We have a statutory mandate in California to get to 100% carbon free by 2045. And there's some interim targets that are quite aggressive as well. So we may not have a discretionary choice here. That is we don't have a choice. And we have to figure out how we're going to get to 100% in these conditions and still maintain reliability and affordability as primary objectives in California. So this is a huge challenge, not just for us, but for the entire state. It's going to get really expensive. So.
And so, you know, with that, Monica, I think just looking at how we're going to strategize approaching that, you know, for the long term. Maybe there's savings that we take by doing a lower percentage now that we might have to, you know, fill in the end. I don't know. Those are the thoughts that I guess I'm having.
That's exactly how we're thinking too, Director Martinez Beltran.
Amrit, did you have comments on this?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify on the recommendation page. And also I just want to point out that we have more PPAs. As more PPAs come online, our carbon-free need also goes down. So that helps going forward as well. In recommendation number 2, I just want to point out we don't have a budget for 25 yet. So our cost is not within budget. Maybe Chris, we strike that part out because you have recommendation number 3 that says, you know, if we're not able to procure, we stay at the current level.
Yeah, I think yeah, I can change that on it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm understanding.
Can you clarify what change you would like again?
Yeah, so the
Clean goal, 100% clean goal for 2025.
For calendar year 2025.
yeah.
So yeah, just that point. Number 2, it says if carbon-free resources are not available, adjust 100% clean. Take out the and or cost is not within budget because we don't have a budget for next fiscal year.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
And number 3 already says, you know, if we're not able to procure, we'll stay at the current clean target levels.
Okay,
that makes sense.
Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah.
Thank you. Director Meadows?
Yes, thank you, Chair Klein. Are we, are you taking just questions now and then we'll do discussion afterwards?
We'll do.
Or
You can, I think we're moving
One
questions.
question.
One more question, and I'll come back to you. Just hang on for a second. Director Walia.
Thank you, Chair Klein. Thank you for all the questions. 99% of my questions have been answered, so I'll be quick. Just one minor clarification. The climate action plans that have been referred to in one of the earlier slides, Chris, are these, are we talking municipal governments here, or are we talking residential?
I think it's municipal governments, and just to be clear, and Zoe, maybe you can confirm this, all of our members are on Green Prime right now. So they already get the premium product.
So who is going to be impacted in the Green Start customers
we
with
only have-
climate action plans?
I think we only have one member who's not, and that might be the city of Sunnyvale.
What?
Yeah. So that would be it.
So that was the clarification I was looking for, because that was my understanding.
Yeah.
That the municipal governments are under, so this is a very small percentage, that's what I wanted to highlight.
But that said, and we can confirm with the city of Sunnyvale staff, Green Start is still a very good product and will still probably align well with their climate action plan. We just need to confirm that.
Okay, so this is not going to be a big issue from just the climate action plan's perspective. That's what I was trying to just bring
Exactly,
forward.
yes.
Okay, that's great. All my other questions have been answered, except do you want to provide a little more? You touched upon the state level reliability, affordability, and I'm focusing on the affordability part. But that's an unknown right now, except we know things are happening, which will help us.
Yeah, well, we know things are expensive now, because we
Right.
hear that from everybody.
Right.
And bringing on these resources, so much new clean capacity has its challenge from a physical standpoint. They're hard to interconnect, right? And we're seeing delays there, and those delays are causing even more cost increases, right? But I
Front
think.
page of the Mercury today has a PG&E delays and connections kind of lawsuit sort of thing.
And I want to talk about that.
We'll get there. Yeah, I agree.
But yeah, so affordability is, and when we talk about strategic focus areas, we'll also get to that as well. And so it is that balance between affordability, reliability, and having to be clean, not a question of whether we will be clean. It's in statute. That's that whole pathway discussion that we're doing. We'll lay out different ways to get there.
Okay.
And so we hired a consultant to help us with that assessment. It's a now at this point, multi-year process. And it also works with the state's integrated resource planning effort, because the state tells us we have to do certain things too. And the state has also a directive to try to look at affordability as well and reliability. So we don't run this, we don't direct how that happens. We have to follow what the state tells us.
Thank you. I don't have other questions. Thanks.
Vice Chair, did you have a question or?
I do, and my question is, can customers purchase Green Prime in sufficient quantity or a mix so that they can meet their climate action plan goals?
Yes.
Okay, so then,
Yeah, they buy it for 100% of their load. Green Prime, it's for all of your load.
All load, it's not
Right,
partial.
but do they, to meet their climate action plans, do they have to buy 100%? I'm trying to figure out what their alternatives are and if it's going to be a deal breaker for them. That's where I'm coming from.
I don't know explicitly what's in most cities' climate actions plan, but I think they have one related to power supply. And then they have other measures in transportation, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
For the power supply component of it, Green Prime meets because it zeroes out their
Well,
emissions.
I understand that, but if they have less than 100%, then it could work for them, is where I'm going. And
Yeah,
maybe,
Green Start could work for them as well.
yeah, and if they have a 100%, maybe they need to adjust their climate action plans. because, to reflect the quote new reality. But I'll make some comments on that later on.
Okay.
But they couldn't guarantee that everybody's on Green Prime. If they're counting what their residents.
Oh,
Right.
oh, I understand. So just to clarify, the cities that are on Green Prime is for their load.
For their
load, not for all of their customers.
That's where I'm coming from.
Includes the residents.
Yes, not for all of their residents. Yeah, but still, an 85% clean product going to 100% long-term, getting to 90% by 2030, that's still a significant reduction in emissions. And so we have to do that planning on behalf, that's what our integrated resource planning effort is. We have to do that on behalf of all of our customers.
Director Meadows.
Thank you. I want to follow on to the Green Prime versus Green Start. So when we allocate, so Green Prime, 100% carbon free, do we do anything different? I mean, the streams that our customers get, we don't have a separate line of Green Prime versus Green Start, right? So is it really just a matter of allocation where when a customer says, I want Green Prime and I'm going to pay you for that, then that we allocate that in our load and pay more for that 100%. But in reality, people, customers are getting what comes to them, right? So it's really, so we're not really doing anything different other than the squeeze on our requirement for 100%.
Well, no, we procure incremental resources to meet Green Prime.
Right. So it's forcing our procurement to service that customer base. But in reality, they don't have separate lines. It's just driving the overall.
Oh yeah, none of us have separate lines yet.
Right. So our right now it's about 5%, if I heard you correctly. So 5% of our load is 100% carbon free, and then we're working with the bulk of the load really to find these resources. So then. So one thing I didn't see, and I think I've seen before, is where you show a graph of each year what percent carbon free SVCE has been. I think that would be a useful graph. If I recall, we were increasing, more and more carbon free, and now we're taking a bit of a dip. So I think that context would be useful when that discussion comes to the board, because I do think this is a serious conundrum. So that would be helpful to see that. And then the other thing that I think would be helpful to understand is if we set various targets for Green Start to be carbon free. So it sounds like right now our percent in Green Start is basically the best we can do, right? Without Herculean price and budget impacts. And so that's where we're getting that, what is 75 to 85% free. Is that correct? It's the best we can do. There's a legal term for that, due diligence, or best efforts basis, right? Would that be an accurate way to describe it?
Yes,
Okay.
but that doesn't mean that we won't continue to try our best efforts. Like we go out and survey the market all the time. If something changes, we'll hear about it and we'll act on it.
Right. No, understood. And I'm not disparaging our best efforts basis, but that's what it is. But the board has the option, and again, context that might be important to see would be to see if we set a let's say at 85%, if we set 85% that we're going to pay as long as there's availability to get to 85% clean, what the impact on the budget is. And what if we set it at 90% clean, what the impact on the budget is? I'd kind of like to see, all we saw was tens of millions. Well, what does that mean? Because 20 million, we spend a lot of money. We spend it wisely and usefully, but this again is getting to the core mission. So is it more important to spend money on maintaining a higher threshold for which we're willing to pay more because this directly impacts our mission or not? So that comparator would be helpful as well. And so that would, I think, frame the discussion better. And then the other reason I feel this is important is, there's sort of an internal and external perception. So it is important for us to understand that all the other CCAs are in the same boat. And I don't know how accurately we can know that, as you said, but we know everyone's having a hard time purchasing it, and we might be more clean than others. But that's an industry-wide comparator versus what our customers perceive. So I think that's the struggle with this issue is, we're not Silicon Valley cleanish energy, so that's why I think showing the comparators of if we set the target at 85%, what's the hit to the budget? 90%, again, assuming these are even technically feasible.
Exactly.
It's so critical to our mission, we should be willing to pay more for it.
100%. I think but the point is whether it's technically feasible. Sometimes it's not a question of spending money. Sometimes it's a question of finding the resource.
Understood. So I think that's, but it still presents a conundrum. And we already have our customers. If we were in this position at the beginning, because again, the comparator with PG&E, they have some built-in advantages because they can sort of have more power to get at some of the, no pun intended, to get to some of the resources. But I do think, and as one of the other directors mentioned, we need to know whether this is a short-term thing. I know there's a long-term requirement, but if nobody can feasibly get to that, then that's a broader question, and it needs to be acknowledged at the state level too. But I do think this is core for us to invest in, to do the more potentially higher than our best efforts basis, but within feasibility.
Thank you. And before we continue our discussions, let's go to the public. Public wishes to speak?
Yes, I have several things I'd like to say. Let me.
You need to move closer so people can hear you.
Yeah.
Where is the?
So just have a seat at the table for just a second, but he'll at least be also kind of at least part of the back. So you have 3 minutes.
Okay, great. Bruce Carney speaking on behalf of myself, no organization. The only other CCA that has attempted to be completely carbon-free is Peninsula Clean Energy. At one point, they had a commitment to be 24/7 by 365 clean by 2030. They backed off from that, largely for the same reasons that Monica's talking about. One of the things that I think is really important to have in this conversation is when SVCE emits some carbon, it imposes a social cost on other humans in the world through ill health, through additional sea level rise that would not have taken place if that carbon hadn't been emitted. There are lots of arguments about what is the proper social cost of carbon. What should we tax it at? Is it $50 a ton? Is it $100 a ton? Is it $200 a ton? If it were $100 a ton, the proposed change to essentially add 100 pounds per megawatt hour would have a cost of $18 million per year imposed on the world by SVCE. That's in the same ballpark as the cost that SVCE says it would have to pony up if it were to buy the clean energy, if it were available. I think the analysis needs to include social cost of carbon so you all can see how that's going. To speak to Director Meadows' question, when this organization was founded, its emissions were 0 for several years, and they have risen to 72 pounds in the last year, for which I have data, and I believe the next year will be in the same ballpark. So going from 0 to 72 to 170 is a big change, and it will show up in the reports that your cities generate when they try to figure out how many pounds of CO2 have been emitted, and it will go in the wrong direction. You will be moving away from achieving your climate goals. Diablo Canyon, an interesting source of carbon-free power. Many of the activists in San Luis Obispo County hate it, and they're working their tails off to close it as soon as they can. SVCE is one of the most nuclear-friendly CCAs, and I expect that will continue. But there's certainly a lot of pressure in Sacramento to get the governor to stop being a fan of Diablo Canyon. Let's see, what else? Of course, would love to see SVCE stay 100% carbon-free. I know that impossible things are impossible, and I suspect that money could be thrown at this to make it possible. There are several incidents when SVC has boxed itself in. We have lowered our rates from 1% discount to 4% discount, and it's hard to unratchet back to that. That would be a source of money. The Green Prime discount is a subsidy to those who choose Green Prime. I spoke about that at the time the choice was made. So those are some options that would be available.
Thank you. Any remote speakers wishing to speak on this?
No hands raised, Chair.
Okay, we'll close public comment. Vice Chair, you had some comments?
I have a number of comments and observations. If you look at our mission at a broad perspective, I think it's to increase electrification that will result in a reduction of greenhouse gases. And I think we need to do everything possible to do that. And that's at a broad level. When I look at how we get there, I think it will be very difficult to get there by increasing rates in the current environment. And I think that it will move people away from electrification. And if you look at it kind of on a broad perspective, when you look at mobility, and I'm talking simply gas-powered car vehicles, light-duty vehicles versus electric vehicles and or hybrid vehicles. I don't like hybrid vehicles, but everyone takes a realistic perspective on that, a practical perspective. But I'm just wondering, what we need to do is have a balance so that in general we're moving in the right direction and reducing our collective carbon footprint, if you will. And the challenges at the state level, when I look at what Senator Becker is pushing for, to move faster for connectivity by PG&E, and then it's like the CPUC is considering, and or PG&E, who are very powerful, obviously, no pun intended, that cost is going to get pushed into the rates. And the more you push things into the rates are going to reduce the electrification. The other part of the conundrum that Director Meadows is refers to is where people say, you know what, the power isn't clean. And, so what are you really doing? How are you moving the needle on this? Are you just moving the carbon footprint around, but in general, the carbon footprint is staying the same? So this is very important in how we understand it, and the position we take has to be thought through very well. And of course, the financial implications are there. So understanding this and having a solid position before it's taken to the board is very important, I think. And maybe I'm saying things that staff recognize, but having FAQs, that answer those questions that relate to detail that aren't at a board level presentation, I think is important, and being able to have those FAQs for our customers and or constituents, I think is important. So this is pretty key. But I also think there's a strong tie to Sacramento and what's going on in Sacramento. And we can't just, quote, stay in our lane. We have to see the big picture and help the folks in Sacramento understand the big picture. So kind of a whole bunch of comments.
Appreciated, yes. Director Martinez Beltran?
Thank you, Chair. I really appreciated the comments that Director Meadows had made, looking at the chart. I think that would be helpful for the board. So I would definitely, second that idea. I would even like for us to look at the 80% level as possible, 80, 85, 90, so that we have a good purview there. I'm wondering what about PG&E? What is their rate of energy, the cleanliness, or, where are they at? Where do we measure up to them?
That's an interesting question because when you look at the power content label, they look cleaner than us. You have to kind of dig a little bit deeper. First of all, they lost a lot of load in the last couple of years. So as some of the CCAs have been expanding, PG&E's load continues to decrease. So the denominator gets lower and lower, right? And then the same power source disclosure or power content label rules that were passed by the California Energy Commission, they have established a resource ordering priority things. So if you have, like PG&E does, a lot of natural gas in their portfolio, so long as they have sufficient clean resources, RP, renewable and carbon-free resources, hydro, nuclear, to cover their load, they don't have to count the natural gas stuff. So they first get to count all of their carbon, all of their carbon-free, so not RPS, then their RPS. And once they've hit their load requirements, they don't have to count anything else. So their natural gas doesn't appear on the power content label. That's how the rules are set.
So we need to change the rules.
We've tried.
Director Walia?
Just a clarification, thanks.
I have one. I'm not done, but yeah.
No, it's on a clarification on this note.
Yeah,
Sure,
so
sure.
on the PG&E thing, so if they're not using the natural gas, that is not actually being, those plants are not operating.
No, they are operating. They're making money, they're operating, they're using those resources. So there's two things that you have to take. So one is what the customer sees, and that's the power content label. And that's how a lot of people define how clean one is versus another. So that's one. But then there's the integrated resource planning process and all the things that we as load serving entities, including PG&E, has to submit to the state. In those filings, they have to show their emissions associated with their natural gas resources. There they show them.
And
So
what's that called, Monica? Pardon me?
the integrated resource planning process.
But why don't they have to show it on the PCL? Because
That's just how the rules were written.
Okay, thank you. That helps, thanks.
Thank you. Director Martinez Beltran, continue.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm not kidding when I say that we need to change the rules, which goes to what my other comment is going to be, because the game has changed. Things have changed since we've come on as SVCE, and we have morphed and we have learned, and we are, everybody's kind of moving towards how do we address the carbon emissions. And so I think that really is important to convey to Benna that and the CCA or Cal CCA that at what are the rules for how that power content label is labeled, because that's how we're being measured against our competitors. One, but two, that also brings me just thoughts that I'm having on, when SVCE came to fruition, and looking at, being, again, Silicon Valley clean energy in our name. But I think we've had a lot of learnings along the way. I certainly have had a lot of learning along this 6-year trajectory, and understanding the impact that we have had, not only as being a provider of clean energy, but we're changing the map. We're changing the map with our residents, with our programs that we have to help people with rebates, with the education. Look at the education grants we're doing in the schools. We're getting to the younger kids. I mean, we are really changing the curve in the education in so many different ways. In the advertising, we're doing everything. And it's harder to find people who don't understand the concerns that cities and our state and, are facing now. And so I just wonder to what degree that plays in as well, as much as our name being Silicon Valley Clean Energy, and realizing that this is kind of impacting everybody as we're all trying to use the resources to meet this huge goal. Do we also want to count on, maybe some of those programs and efforts that we've made and how that also is contributing to reducing emissions?
Ray, did you have a comment related to this?
Yeah, I just wanted to make one comment for the committee's consideration coming from a finance perspective. I think one thing perspective I'd like to share is, obviously we don't have unlimited funds. The question is the incremental dollars that we would spend if we were to go and seek these resources, which are very difficult to find, and prices are in the near term very high. We do see in the forward market very, very thinly traded, starting in 2-3 years is coming down. But question is, when a resource is scarce, the prices go through the roof. So the question is, if we were to pay those premiums right now, how much of an incremental effort would we make in reducing carbon if we were to pay those prices to look good on our PCL versus if we were to take those dollars and direct it to programs, to customers? So that's a trade-off we also have to make. We are driven by our mission, which is to reduce carbon. And where can we best get the bang for our buck? Is it paying this premium, which will look good on our PCL, or using those dollars in our programs and in our rates to drive decarbonization? So just a perspective I wanted to share.
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm saying. And I think that we do have to look at that because of where we're at now, which you learn as you go through. And so just thinking about where we are now, that maybe we need to reassess that. And of course, it would need to be measurable. We've been able to impact with programs this, and this, and reduce emissions by this amount, but that might be something worth thinking about as well.
Can I respond to some of the points that Director
Absolutely.
Just for starters, thank you for all your comments and suggestions. And, certainly this was almost the same exact discussion we had last year when we talked about 2024. We were hoping it was a 2024 issue and we wouldn't have to come back, and that we could have this be part of the bigger assessment that we're doing on our value proposition and affordability, reliability, clean. Unfortunately, we have to set a budget for next fiscal year, and that's where OMRIT's at now. And so OMRIT needs to know, are we going to try to do all that is necessary to get to 100% and include that in the budget? Or so that's why we brought it to you today. But we have a little bit of time. We can still work on this, and we will before we go to the board. Director Martinez-Beltran, so we have made a lot of efforts on following the proceedings at the California Energy Commission related to the power source disclosure. We have been heavily involved in those proceedings, not just through CalCCA, but on our own. And like I said before, we have had some influence in how they treat geothermal on those power source disclosures. So we've made our points over and over and over. It is what it is where we're at right now. And so we only get an opportunity every 2 years because they have a proceeding cycle associated with those rules. So we're there, and we know this is important. The other point I wanted to make was 100% agree with what Amrit's saying. These are trade-offs, right? And we will have this discussion again as part of the pathways. I'm not trying to punt it, but it's a very big discussion with a lot of things that come in. And the things that we're doing in the community with respect to programs and resiliency programs and all of the stuff that we're doing to help our member agencies and our community, we do take into consideration what the impacts on greenhouse gas emissions are associated with those program and efforts. It's hard to measure though, right? It's really hard to measure, but we make estimates, and we do include that in our overall kind of how are we impacting our community assessment. So all of these points are very well taken. This is a really complicated thing, and when you play with one, something else changes over here, right? So
Thank you, Monica. I know you guys are dealing with us, so, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Final comments before we get to a motion? I do have a few comments. And definitely the more information you can provide the board as we go forward, from a trade-off standpoint, as we're trying to look at the budget, going through a budget supplement yesterday, a budget workshop yesterday and budget supplements, trying to say trade-offs of, as Director Meadows was talking about, 85%, 90%, trying to figure out having a certain amount of flexibility from conceivably even our budgetary standpoint and how much we might want to undertake that this year of, okay, this is additional, to hit this point, and each additional 5% is an additional reduction in reserves or something of that nature. And then whether or not, and having a recommended budget, but then saying what we do from a city standpoint is, okay, budget supplement 1, do you want to hit 85%? Do you want to hit 90%? And allowing the board to discuss it at a bigger point. I don't know how much flexibility you want to give to that, but at least saying, do we want to add an additional commitment this year to do an additional 5% is something to look at. Messaging all this, exactly what Director Meadows and Martinez Beltran talked about on, for one thing, our clean energy, but the other half of that is our programs and the positive things that we do. I know it's hard to measure, but it's those trade-offs and not having enough truly clean energy, 100% renewable clean energy in the state. And I hope that Diablo Canyon stays going for as long as it can, because that makes a big difference. Although our allotment is reduced, and that I think has become a big question, is pushing back on, is it a Northern California thing? Is it where does it really stand as far as where that energy comes from and how it's allocated? Anyway, that's my quick comments. Any other quick comments?
I just want to say thanks to staff. It's a very complex subject and you're constantly juggling all the pieces. Some can be easier to quantify, the others are harder. And I just want to say thanks.
Thank you. Vice Chair?
I'll make some quick comments. I've always maintained, our city, don't break the rules, change the rules. So I agree that, we need to understand that. And that's not a single threaded sort of push. We've got to understand that at a broad level. And I think that if the playing field isn't, quote, level, then it should be level. And people do need to understand what really is in their power. I agree with the trade-offs and understanding what your comments, Chair Klein, on budget supplements and really understanding that. I would be supporting, I believe it's recommendation number 2.
I think it's just the general.
Or it's all three. Yeah, all three. I would be supporting the recommendations and giving direction that we, as our CFO moves forward with the budget, that we understand that we're not going to be as carbon free as we intended. And this is kind of the reality coming at us that we've discussed in the past.
The motion with the modifications that.
With the modifications, yes.
Are you making that motion?
I am prepared to at the end of discussion.
Just my additional comment is I'm in favor of this concept. I do appreciate the fact that these are things that may not be achievable in terms of the 85, 88, 90%, but I think it's worth a bit of an effort to do that. But I think what I've learned from this conversation too is this is in the context of our power content label, but we're also looking at to what extent are we reducing natural gas usage in the homes and gasoline in the cars. And I feel like that's the bigger number whether it's 80% versus 85%. I feel like that's the bigger direction. So I think we understand that, so.
Thank you.
You see, okay.
Director Meadows?
Thank you. Yes. So I just want to say I'm going to support bringing, well, again, staff will bring more, I believe, and I hope will bring more context as we talked about forward for the board discussion. So I will support the motion to bring this forward to the board, and then the context will help me decide at the board meeting whether I support the recommendation or not. So I'm supporting having this discussion at the board with the added context. But I'm not necessarily supporting the 85, or whatever the number 2 was that just disappeared again. I'm going to reserve judgment for the context will help us understand a little better. If that makes any sense.
Yep. Vice Chair, you ready for the motion?
We've got another comment.
Oh, sorry.
Thank
Director Martinez.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify because, well, I guess I get it here. It says 78 to 85%, but then I saw 2024, we had only procured the 80%. So, okay. And we'll be including that. So I think I will be with Meadows as well, just looking to get that different comparison and have some more conversation at the board.
So if there's no more comments, then I'll make the motion as amended and set out on the slide.
Thank you. Second by Tyson. Can you please conduct a roll call vote?
Chair Klein?
Yes?
Vice Chair Mekachik?
Aye.
Director Tyson?
Yes.
Director Walia?
Aye.
Director Martinez-Beltran?
Aye.
Meadows?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
Thank you. Thank you all for the lively discussion. I think budget is never an easy sort of thing, and how we deal with the resources available to us to get to our goals is a bigger question. Let's move to item number 5, intro to the 2025 strategic plan. Monica?
That would be me. So I'm gonna go through this. I guess my preference would be just to kind of go through it quickly and then
Yes.
ask questions if that's okay. Okay.
Yep.
So this is my first strategic planning process here at SVCE as your CEO. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of context and overview as well. So next slide, Andrea. So we're talking about the FY 24-25 strategic plan, and it coincides with the budget process, which Amrit, our CFO, kicked off with the Finance Committee on May 13th. And so as part of this process, there's a few things that we do, and that's really just to kind of look internally to see, are we on the right path? Do we have the right mission? Are our goals and measures reflective of what we're trying to achieve? And so that's an internal process that we go through right now. But today we're going to really focus on strategic focus areas. And strategic focus areas, depending on the organizations that you've worked for, in my opinion, are things that are really kind of key initiatives that are different than operational things. They're different than what we do day to day. They're really meant to say, hey, this is a new concern, this is a new issue. This is what we need to come together as an organization and as a board to focus on. So we're going to focus on strategic focus areas today. I'll highlight the progress that we've made so far on the strategic focus areas that the board approved for the fiscal year 23-24 cycle. I'll talk a little bit about some of the input that we've gotten from staff on those. And then mostly I just kind of want to put out the process, talk about the focus areas and get some of your feedback, and then we'll talk about next steps. So this is our historically, this is how we've gone through this process. Again, a lot of input from staff, some discussions with the executive committee and the board, but ultimately in September, we go with the strategic plan. And the strategic plan has those strategic focus areas where we've gotten all the input from the board and staff. And then in October, generally, we bring to the board on the consent calendar the whole enchilada. So the strategic focus areas, the strategic plan with the goals, and then a work plan that is very kind of detailed on all the measures that all the different departments are advancing in support of the goals and the mission. And so we're actually having some internal discussions about how detailed we want that to be going forward. That is the item that we bring to the board. Maybe we don't need to bring so much detail because it is a lot. Next slide. So this is our process. It starts with, again, kind of an internal assessment. We have kind of two ways of doing this. We have a very kind of methodical approach that OMRET leads on this risk registry, where we identify all the threats to the organization and any opportunities in a very methodical way. And that makes us think in a very structured way again. And then we have all the stuff that we do all the time. We all sit on committees. We all are out in the community. We read the paper, we read everything. We know what's going on, and we kind of synthesize that on like what are some of the challenges, threats, and opportunities. And so then we work on the strategic focus areas, and then that factors into the budget, because if we have to change course or add new resources or give up on something, whatever it is, that will factor into the budget. And then it also leads to the question, do we need to rethink our mission? And I'm here to say today that I don't think we have to rethink our mission. I think our mission is solid. Clean, carbon-free, there's different flavors of that. I do believe we are clean, and this is something that we continue to try to work towards. Next slide. So on strategic focus areas, again, we're in the process right now where we scan the landscape, and then we kind of synthesize that and get input from all kinds of folks. We don't really go to our customers and community to get input. I know that some organizations spend a lot of time on that as well. I think, our board is very reflective of our community, and we lean on you for that input to, what are our customers thinking? What are our members thinking? Our effort right now is really on just focusing on those strategic focus areas that we have in place right now. Like, what have we achieved? What progress have we made? Are these things now operational? They're less strategic and more part of our DNA. What are the top 5 items that we should be focusing on in the next 12 months or even beyond that? And then what are some of the challenges that we're seeing right now that, maybe we set a strategic focus area and we've determined that it doesn't really work. It's too broad, it's too big of a challenge, or maybe it's not in scope anymore. And then we'll work on, proposing what to do with our existing focus areas and then new focus areas if any are needed. Next slide. And I'm not going to read through all of this, but these are the strategic focus areas that are approved by the board for this current fiscal year. And so there's 5 of them. The first one focuses on expanding clean and reliable resources and grid actions. The second one focuses on expanding customer base and interaction. The third one is on accelerating building and transportation electrification. The fourth one is on implementing innovative financing solutions. And the fifth one is on attracting and retaining employees. So these were the things that when we came to you we started in May 2023 and came to you in October or September timeframe 2023. This is what we thought was important for the next 12 months. Next slide. And there's a lot of details that I haven't provided in terms of what supports each of those strategic focus areas because there's a lot behind them. But just in general, wanted to share with you some of the progress that we've made on each of these strategic focus areas. So for the one related to expand and clean, reliable grid actions, kind of the sub-bullet there is that we would explore 24/7 clean energy delivery at scale and evaluate SVCE's role in enhancing distribution and transmission reliability. These were set because at that time, we weren't even thinking about whether we could get to 100%. That wasn't our big challenge, whether we can get to 100% clean in 2024 for Green Start. Our challenge was how could we get to 24/7? So, but now that's changed. And so this will be modified quite significantly going forward. And so we have made a lot of progress, and I'm not going to read everything we've done here, but I'm just, this just reflects that, we're talking about this. We've hired a consultant to help us develop these pathways. We continue to work with Google on their carbon-free framework to understand how we can consistently operate that since it's a 10-year deal. We've established a Tiger team internally. That Tiger team is one that's very focused on a particular thing to look at our role in distribution enhancements and these issues with interconnection and energizing our customers. We participated in many proceedings related to energization, transmission, and interconnection. We launched or we had to do our very first load management standard compliance report, which we spent a lot of time at this group and at the board talking about. And we've launched an internal team that focuses on demand flexibility and virtual power plants and how we're going to implement all of these kind of pilot rates and pilot programs that are going to be required by the state. And then we also created an in-house load forecasting function to really understand what's going to drive our load, not just long-term, but even on an hourly basis. How is our load modifying over time? And we have lots to come, still more to implement some of this, to continue doing some of the good work that we've been doing to date. But the challenges in meeting this particular strategic focus area continue, affordability being a very big one. The lack of clean and reliable resources continues to be a struggle. And then really not understanding what our customers want, quite frankly. If customers truly want 100% clean, then they could be on Green Prime, right? But we haven't seen a big uptick on that. Do they really value 100% clean at any cost? We haven't asked our customers those questions either. We again rely on the board for their input there. And then we've also come to the realization, not something that is a good realization for us, but we have very little influence on distribution and transmission related cost and those proceedings. And so what is our real role there? Where can we focus our efforts to be effective? On strategics, we can go to the next one.
I had a question about that.
Carla, let's come back. Let's let her go through all these, because this could take a long time, and I think we're already behind. We're definitely behind time.
And I can go much faster too. So on the second one, which is expand customer base and interaction, this was really about, and I won't go through all the details here, but this was really about trying to figure out a way that we could add additional direct access customers. Those are customers who have decided to have an alternative supplier to us and PG&E for their generation services. So here we were really targeting how we can get some of those customers back. What we found is that that's a challenge. GA conversion, while we were successful in some cases, is a very lengthy process and one that we have very little influence. When a customer decides that they want to change suppliers, it's not an easy decision on their end. Sometimes they're locked into long-term contracts and they can't just leave. But really here where we see the big opportunity is not so much on expanding our direct access load, but rather expanding our decarbonization efforts with certain customers that we hadn't been targeting before. And so last month when we went to the board, or I guess it was this month, we talked about this Clear Results program for our C&I customers. We think we can add value there and really kind of move the needle in that place. And so really our focus here is on what can we do for our non-residential customers in the decarbonization space. Next slide. On strategic focus area number 3, this is about accelerated deployment of currently adopted decarbonization strategies, goals, and evaluate and capitalize on federal and state funding opportunities. So it's basically doing more of what we do right now, but seeing if there's a way that we could do it more effectively and using outside funding. And so here are some of the challenges and opportunities we're finding is one, and Zoe can attest to this, so she works on this closely, is deploying decarbonization at scale that is for everyone is a challenge. And it's a funding challenge. It could be an affordability, but it requires a ton of money to do that, to implement that for everybody. And who's going to pay for that? Should it be ratepayers? Should it be taxpayers? Should it be someone else? Like, I don't know who else. Private investors, I don't know. And so that's a big one. And then there's these BACMD. BACMD is the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. BACMD has new rules coming out starting in 2027 that would ban natural gas water heaters. And then there's some additional bans that are coming after that. What is our role in preparing our community, our customers for those changes, those big changes that are going to happen in the Bay Area? Like, what do we do there? And then REACH codes, as we all are aware, of the Berkeley lawsuit and what transpired after that, REACH codes are at risk. So what should we be doing there? How can we better support our member agencies? We've done a lot, but what is the right thing to do going forward in order to support that? And then again, affordability and reliability continue to be a concern even under, especially under a high electrification scenario where everybody's relying on electricity to meet all of their end uses. Next slide. Implement innovative and financing solutions. So here, this was all about how we can find alternative ways to fund some of these decarbonization and clean power supply portfolio initiatives that we have. And we've made a lot of progress here. We did our third prepay this last year, and we are leading the effort on this tariff on bill financing discussion at the state. And then I think we're going to be launching a pilot program this year as well. So we've made a lot of effort here. We're looking at, Zoe and her team is looking at ways to how we could finance decarbonization in an alternative way to just using our customers through rates, essentially. So we'll be doing that as well. The challenges and opportunities here is that CPUC is moving really slowly on the tariff on bill financing. I think this is probably a function of it has to go through PG&E. It has to go through PG&E's bill. And there's some, constraints there because it's an old, antiquated system. And then there's also concerns about funding that the state had provided in the past through their budget, because now they're operating in a budget deficit. So that, some of these first things to go are these types of programs and initiatives. Next slide. And then the last one was about attracting and retaining employees, and that was amended at one point to include hiring a new CEO. Well, I'm here to say that happened, so we don't have to do that again, hopefully not in the next 12 months. But here, kind of the challenge and opportunities that we see in this space is we're at the point where we're at 62 employees now. And we think that there's an optimal level of our staffing. We don't know if it's 70 or 100, but we know it's not too big. I think it's probably closer to where we are now, plus a few more positions. But what we really want to focus on is how do we retain the culture that we have here that allows us to be so collaborative and so interdependent on each other and really work effectively together. How do we keep that culture? And how do we keep it at the right size? How do we keep it in our remote setting where we're not all together? So how do we build on that? That's going to be our focus. And that also includes how do we bring our employees up? How do we advance them? How do we develop them individually and as an organization? How do we sharpen the saw? So that's what's going to be our focus in the next 12 months. And then we can go to the next slide. I kind of jumped around. I kind of jumped to a little bit of what we plan to do. And this, again, is given staff's input. We really want to hear your input, too. If we're not on the right track, let us know. But all of the strategic focus areas, with the exception of number 4, we're proposing that we keep, but we'll modify them. We're going to modify them to make them simpler in some cases, a little more. We still want to have a reach, but we have to also be realistic, right? So a little bit of that happening, too. The one that we propose to drop is this implement innovative financing solutions. We've done a lot of work there. It's operationalized. And so I think we're good there. And then we're going to propose adding a new one that focuses on affordability. Because again, we've heard it through you, we've heard it through customers directly. We know it's an issue at the state. We read about it all the time. Affordability and how we maintain our clean directives and reliability at the same time, because it's not just affordability in a vacuum, it's affordability and doing everything else we have to do. That I think needs to be a strategic focus area of ours for the next 12 and beyond, perhaps. I don't think it ever goes away, but we're really going to focus on what does it mean here at SVCE? What resources do we have to realign? Who do we have to bring in? What do we need to do? What do we need to tell the board? How do we educate them? So that's what we're proposing. And if we go to the next slide, I'm almost done here. This is the strategic plan. So the strategic focus areas kind of direct, they align with the mission and they kind of direct what goals and measures we'll put in place as well, but not entirely. Next slide. And then this is the plan in terms of what you'll see coming up in the next few months. And so we are here today. That's May 24th, but you can see we have quite a bit of steps before we get to approval by the board. And I believe that's it.
So before we get to directors, I just wanted to quickly go to the public. Any Comments for the public?
I do, thank you for the opportunity. I agree that affordability is a critical variable, but I'd like to frame it in the context of not just the cost per kilowatt hour, the rate that is often the focus of affordability discussions, but what can you do with money to transform people's choices about how to power their homes and heat their buildings and their water? And so I would suggest that SVCE's per kilowatt hour rate should be just a fraction below the competitors, a fraction below PG&E's, but that our incentive programs, like our e-electric rate for those who have made a transition, or incentives to make the transition, program funds for future fit home programs. That's what you want to make affordable, and particularly because people are much more aware of the size of a big multi-$1,000 rebate than they are in the fractional pennies per kilowatt hour of the bill that they never read anyway. So there are all sorts of ways to accelerate the transition of cars to electric cars, homes to electric homes, that don't require your rates to be 5% less than PG&E's.
Thank you. Any remote members of the public wishing to speak? Thank you. Vice Chair?
Thank you for the overview, and I think this is absolutely critical, and we're in a difficult year. I really like slide 7. Can you go to slide 7? I have a comment or two on that. I guess I'll be considering the time very succinct with my comments, and I'll leave out a number of them. SVCE has little influence on distribution and transmission related costs. I think that's it. What I'm hearing from my constituents in Monte Sereno and surveying the landscape is that's a barrier to electrification. And we need to deal with that. And that's not to say that we have little influence on it. I think we need to have influence on it for us to fulfill our mission. And then go to SFA3, please. My question is, when's the next reach code cycle? And I think we should expect a lot of resistance to the BACMed once people start to understand what that means, because it's so far out. And I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on that. And where did you have the virtual power plant? Is that on SF?
I think it was on number 2.
2?
No,
Or 1?
4. No, 2. I don't remember.
Go to 1, please.
Virtual is in.
I didn't see it. VPP. Yeah, right there.
There it is.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. I think that is very important from a helping move the collective carbon footprint. And to get to the comment from our member of the public that spoke, I think there's opportunities in there with vehicle electrification and vehicle to grid or vehicle to X. I just want to identify that we need to work on this, because I think some funding may be required from a programming perspective in the future. SFA5, please. My question is, how can the board help with what you're doing? You don't have to answer that, but I just think that we as a board should be able to help, and we're a resource. Slide 12, that's the new SFA. Okay, I agree with removing number SFA4 and new SFA affordability. We've mentioned a number of times trade-offs, and I think that whole affordability and trade-offs, that needs to be explored in the analysis. And then I hate to use words like my final comment, but I'll end this comment with, I'm wondering if the board can provide input through a study session that's not mandatory through the Brown Act, but this is just so important.
On affordability?
Oh, no, on the whole,
on the whole.
as part of your process. So it's a question for our general counsel, maybe. How could we do a study session like we do at the city level and remain in compliance? But so that everyone has a chance to contribute, and then if this is going to be on the consent, I wouldn't want it to be a surprise without people having the opportunity to be involved in it. That concludes my comments.
Thank you. Director Tyson.
Well, I started off with what was going to be a question, and that was, if we were looking at strategic focus areas, wouldn't legislative and regulatory focus be an important one? And then now it's turning into a comment, because I see you've embedded it into the actual focus areas, which are moving us along the path on affordability, cleanliness, and reliability. And so I appreciate that, and I think that's a good approach. And then my final comment is to agree with Vice Chair on the elimination and then adding the affordability, because that is one of those key things we're balancing. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Director Walia.
Thank you, Chair Klein. Monica, thank you so much. There's a lot there, and I'll keep it very short. I agree with the proposal of removing number 4 and adding the affordability. The way I look at it, each one is important, but with the new order, the number 1 and the new number 5, because I'm assuming the employees goes up to number 4, those to the affordability one will be the key in my mind, because they are capturing a lot from every single side, whether we are looking, again, using the example, there's so much in a qualitative manner that how we proceed forward in meeting our mission. And that's where the bulk of the work would happen. I just touch upon only 2 things that have not been mentioned so far. Brian covered a lot. One of your comments was essentially in number 1, you said, so the question is really, what do the customers want? Do they want 100% clean? And we rely on the board. I think with the residential customers, it is such a broad range and a large number of customers. As has been said earlier, they don't even look at their bills. So most of the customers are not tuned into it, but they are tuned into the bottom line of the affordability part. Even the ones who are absolutely not aware, I don't mean it in a negative manner, just not aware of the clean goals or the whatever. To them, it's a basic utility in the context of their life. So I don't believe we need to go to the customers to figure out. It's probably not worth the effort to get input from each. The other key part you touched upon was the BACMED rules coming in. That's an area where I do this very frequently. We need to inform the customers via our cities. I coincidentally was talking to a friend, a resident of mine yesterday, who reached out about something different. And the question was, I don't know, 85-year-old woman, I don't know anything about what's coming in terms of electrification, but I do believe fossil fuels are going to be removed. Can I get this new tractor mower? Can I get this? You get the sense? Mm-hmm. That is where I feel individually cities are not able to provide that information looking forward. I am not saying it is SVCE's job to do it, but you have a lot of excellent knowledge base with the phenomenal team you have here, the 62 or whatever you said. Any help we can get from SVCE into the cities or via us, the board members, we can have an offline conversation on that. But I think keeping that in mind would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's, it's great that Zoe's here, because Zoe is leading the effort, not just for SVCE, but all the Bay Area CCAs on working with the BACMED staff themselves on how we're going to do this collectively. And so and one of the challenges and helping also provide some technical analysis on this as well, and some pilots and some learnings and stuff. So we're very much aware, and that's why we're elevating it to its own strategic focus area, because it's important. And it has, if it's not done right, it can be very damaging to our overall mission. But we know the importance of this.
Thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Director Meadows?
Thank you. So I agree with my colleagues who are all supporting deleting 4 and adding the new 5 of affordability. I do want to make some comments, just a comment or two within the information on SFA1 in particular. I'm not sure I agree with Vice Chair Mekachek, who talked about that SVCE has an important role to play in enhancing distribution and transmission reliability. Sorry, I need to take a drink. Maybe I just don't understand completely, but in some senses, we actually work counter to that, because someone stated earlier in the conversation that PG&E's load has been decreasing, but isn't that partly because the CCAs are and direct access are having increasing load? So overall, PG&E's load may be going down, but the overall use and need for electricity is going up, but maybe not as rapidly as we like. But regardless, we're trying to promote electrification, which actually has a direct impact on PG&E's need to improve their infrastructure. And so, I mean, I think I mentioned the other day in Rock that they had to replace, upgrade a transformer across the street because one new house took their old infrastructure beyond its ability to service. And so, but I don't see I don't really understand what role we would play in enhancing distribution and transmission reliability, when really that the burden is on PG&E to do that, and we actually put further demands on their really archaic infrastructure. So that's more of a comment or question. So I don't know how that fits. Oh, and one other comment I would say, it's important, and I realize in this discussion, and I didn't look it up yet, but if we're talking about strategic focus areas, we should be sure we do include the mission statement in this presentation, because I realized I know the mission broadly, but then I didn't know the specific words. So we should have that mission statement included in discussions where we're talking about strategic focus areas.
It's there, but we'll highlight it again. It's like on slide 3 or something.
Thank you. Director Martinez.
Oh, there, I see it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Quickly, I do agree with, with many of the comments here. And yes, of course, let's drop SFA4 and add affordability. And to speak into affordability, we've all been going through our budgets. We had a couple of comments on energy. It was a big focus of our budget. It's $1.5 million increase that we're seeing in our general fund. And so I think this is definitely on the radar for everybody. I'm sure you all have seen that be a big chunk in your budgets as well. And we are prioritizing, how to address that. And I think, and we had some comments from the public in general. One particular comment talking about how they, as a resident, are also struggling and trying to figure out how that they will deal with the costs as well. So I thought that was a really great and timely addition. I think the BACMed, I really appreciate those efforts with everything going on and kind of the sliding, at least that we may stand to face here with the gas ban that we've had, and maybe making that into, and addressing some of that, and other communities addressing that. I think really the understanding for people to realize what is coming through the BACMed rules is a real good way to encourage and entice them and incentivize them to do that now. One of the talks was about having some of if you have, let's say, senior housing or multifamily housing, and people are allowed to do gas now, they will have to face those costs very shortly in changing over to electricity. And do we really want to put those demands maybe on a senior limited fixed income or lower income households? So I think that that's a really important thing to have there. And then I'll just, since we have it, I really, really appreciate what we've done with our employees. I think that we, SFA 5, I think it's critical to us being able to attract and keep some of the best talent by having the flexibility that we have. And so I think that's definitely somewhere for us to focus as we're trying to tackle some of these challenges that are going to be in front of us. Having some of our senior staff stay with us and see us through this, I think, is critical. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll wrap up with some final comments. First, yeah, I agree with the rest of the executive board as far as removing and adding affordability. One thing that did come up, and I think it's kind of spread throughout, is education, and whether or not that's education on affordability, or if we talk about accelerating building and transportation electrification, it's similarly, it's education of our customers. And you know, the BACMed rule amendments, the 2027, I'll disagree with the vice chair. 2027 isn't that far away. And you know, and you look at it from that standpoint of what residents need to do to prepare for some of these requirements. I think that's a big thing that feeds into, and one thing that's one thing you mentioned here, but I think it's important for a board standpoint, is we've allocated pilot programs, long-term programs, all of that. Some are in the infancy, some are you know, soon we'll be starting. I don't think the board has a good feel for all of the different programs at hand. And that's why we do these updates at this board, at the executive board, at the main board meeting. It would be good to see what programs we have and how it matches to these 5 or 6 minus 1, if we'll call it that, efforts in how we're spending our dollars. Because I do think that that's important also. It gives us a better feel for, you know, and some of these don't have direct programs, but from our city standpoint, we have like a top 30 page where any resident can go, but more importantly, council members can go to say, here's the programs and here's where they are, here's, and you know, here's the top projects, but I look at that from a program standpoint. We have all these great ideas, not enough staff to deal with, to implement them all at any given time, and I'll go back to staff at the end, but I don't know, you know, where they stand, where, you know, where it's like, oh, this is a pilot program, it's succeeding, and we're moving forward here. I think that's an important thing, because that kind of shows from a strategic standpoint, we're committed, or this is where we're lacking and we need to add additional efforts in the next year. So that would be useful for me.
I've heard that from a couple of board members, so we have it, it's just maybe making it more accessible.
Yes.
And in a better format.
And first available to us, then the cities, and then the residents would be useful. And then it finally goes back to having a good staff and making sure that, you know, and I understand the issue of a hybrid staff isn't an easy sort of thing, and a lot of companies are dealing with that. And, you know, as the vice chair said, or I can't remember if it's director ties, whatever we can do from an executive board and a board standpoint to improve that is really important. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you. And we'll move to our last item, item 6, program snapshot, community energy resilience program. Zoe.
Right. Great. Super excited to be here at the end of this really deep, robust conversation with what's, I guess, a little bit celebratory, which is great because we've been delivering a lot of hard news lately on setbacks. And so this, as you all might remember, every So often the programs team comes forward with just like an update, a snapshot on one of the programs that we're working on. Usually Napor introduces them, but she's on a much deserved break. So Jessica is going to give a quick overview. I'll intro it to our Community Resilience Program, which is a grant program that's provided funding to all 13 of our member jurisdictions. Next slide. This is really just a status update. So quick just recap. Back in June 2020, that really challenging time, our board approved $5 million to help our region reduce the impacts of power outage. This was back when PSPS was just becoming a thing, and the board had this foresight to say, okay, let's get in front of this. What can we do to support power outages and climate emergencies, while also investing in kind of clean ways to do this and support local job creation. And so this program provides non-competitive grants to each of our member jurisdictions. Jess is going to go through the really innovative projects that have been funded. And it's set to conclude in December 2024, at which time we'll have a whole host of really innovative demonstration projects throughout the region. I'll hand it over to you, Jessica.
Awesome. Thank you, Zoe. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Perfect. Good morning, everyone. Really excited to present this deck to you all today. So to start, this slide provides a snapshot overview of the number of projects we have funded in our region through this grant. By the end of this program, our grants will have funded an array of different resilience measures, such as 9 battery storage projects to provide backup power at key municipal or community facilities, 5 off-grid EV charger projects, also known as EV ARCs or pear trees, and 2 Ford F-150 Lightning trucks to expand community charging and fleet electrification. We also have 1 heat mitigation project that aims to reduce the heat island effect. Next slide. So what makes this program stand out compared to other grant programs is that it was specifically designed for the member agencies and provided hands-on support. So one of the main program design features was that it provided a flexible process for the member agencies, like making these grants non-competitive and creating a streamlined application and reimbursement process. We also offered several resources to the agencies, like on-call support from consultants who provided technical and planning support. Next slide. All right, on to the fun stuff. In the next few slides, I will be highlighting specific projects that you may have seen in your respective jurisdictions or have even interacted with. So to start, the city of Cupertino used its grant to purchase 2 EV ARCs adjacent to the public library. The EV ARCs will provide public charging to the community and will be able to charge EVs in the event of a power outage. Secondly, for Sunnyvale, they used their grant to support the purchase of a solar plus battery storage unit at the new city hall. This will assist city staff in reducing operational costs, as well as providing backup power during emergency events. Next slide. All right, moving on, Saratoga used its grant to install a backup battery system for 14 of its streetlights within the city. So in the event that there is a power outage or an evacuation, these backup systems will ensure that the traffic lights will stay operational for public safety. And then lastly, our most unique one, the town of Los Altos installed a pool pavement coating in downtown to reduce the outside temperature. And so this cool coating will help offset heat impacts in the community. Now, to tease out, we are developing a new round of member agency grants that we will be releasing later this year. So we are very excited by these current projects and their positive impact in the community. And we look forward to supporting our member agencies become more resilient while decarbonizing. Thank you.
So any questions from Director Walia?
Thanks, I'll keep it very short. Very big thanks for all the work that's being done in all the communities. The question is about the cool pavement coating, how, I know nothing about it. So price, how long it lasts, etc. And I'll add my comment so that I don't speak again. In Saratoga, we have some projects happening where I think what I saw in Cupertino would be fabulous in Saratoga. It ties back to everything we have been talking about today, to bring the students, to bring the community. I think that's a fabulous one. Much as we love the reality, the benefit of the battery backup at traffic light signals in Saratoga, residents don't realize it. So bringing that awareness to customers, I think that one is gigantic, what we have in Cupertino, and I've already talked internally in Saratoga. We are super excited at the idea of considering that whenever the next round. So the cool
Yeah, so
pavement.
I'll give some high level overview and then Jess, maybe you can provide the financial figures because I don't have those at hand. So
Sure.
one, we were thrilled that Los Altos stepped forward with this idea because urban heat island is actually one of the biggest climate impacts, right? Like to public health is from heat. And there's huge amount of evidence that that is very much driven by the urban environment. And then there's also kind of co-impacts from that where increase the demand for air conditioning, right? So kind of one of these things that's pretty scientifically driven, but isn't understood as much, that you can actually cool the environment down. And we had a wonderful staff member from Los Altos who had been waiting to do this. You basically kind of a coating over the pavement that reduces the ambient heat. So that's how it works. I don't know how long it lasts, but we can look into that and get back to you. And then Jess, can you provide information on the cost?
Yeah, of course. So for Los Altos, their allocated grant was about 125,000. I believe they spent around 70 or 80,000 specifically for the downtown area. They are supposed to do a second location in Grant Park, which has yet to begin. Our consultants that we hired to provide technical support, they did provide staff with cost estimates as well as different types of vendors who provide this cool pavement. So if Saratoga staff is interested, I could also share that report that our consultants developed for Los Altos as well.
Thank you, Jessica. So the whole street, do we, just any sense of scale for that price point? Maybe Sally.
Director Meadows has a response.
Okay, great.
Go ahead.
Thanks.
We can come back to you. Director
Great.
Meadows?
Yes, thank you. So we were very excited to do this. It only, we as Jessica mentioned, we didn't use our whole grant on this, but we only did a block. And it was an appropriate block. George, you may know the block. It's where State Street Market is, and one of the blocks where our farmers market is on. And I believe we were doing some criteria, some measurements to understand the cooling effect, if any, but I haven't heard anything about that, and I'm not sure what kind of measurements we'd be able to take. I will say we've had some community complaints lately because the coating does not seem to be holding up. I think it's been, I was mayor when so that was just last year, so maybe it's been there for about a year. It's not looking like it's holding up very well, and once community members reach out to you, then you know it's visible. So I don't, it may need some more work. I think in the other location that we intended was on a basketball court, so that would probably hold up better with people playing on it versus cars driving on it constantly. But so it's been an interesting experiment. I'm not sure what sort of data points we're going to get about the actual cooling, but it was a perfect test location, and I'd be happy to meet anybody at State Street Market if we want to look at it more closely.
Sally, what was the material? Do you have a better?
It's a grayish, I believe, slurry coat, if that's the right way to describe it. And Jessica, if you want to say more about it, but it makes the pavement, instead of looking black, it looks a little bit chalky gray.
Jessica,
yeah, that's exactly what it is. So it's a type of slurry that mixes with paint, and the paint was supposed to be, it was supposed to withstand against obviously being driven on as well as walked on. And so I'll check in with Los Altos staff to see how the quality is. and check in with them to see like if they're continuing with their Grant Park project or if they're going to make some tweaks based on the material.
If you could just do an email to the executive board on just a better, more on that information, it'd be useful. Thank you.
Okay.
Director Martinez Beltran.
Thank you. This is great. I love this presentation, Zoe. So thank you for sharing this. I mean, these are some of the things that I'm talking about, you know, the other ways that we've really, look what we've done in our community. My lights are going off. But this is fantastic. This is the work that I want us to be able to showcase and highlight as well as, you know, our clean energy, because this is amazing. And these are things that I know our city would not be able to do, especially in this time in climate. So, and Sally, I'm wondering, what was that? Do you know what that cost was? Or maybe Jessica, you could tell us that grant for the street surfacing total?
Sure. So Los Altos was awarded, the entire grant was $125,000 for that specific block in downtown on State Street. I believe it was around 70 or 80,000.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the public have any comments? Is there any remote public wishing to speak? Any other final comments? Okay, we will move on to final committee or staff remarks. And I know that there are at least somebody who wanted to talk about PG&E. You want to talk about what was on the front of the paper this morning?
Not really.
Okay.
You'll see it.
Everybody can read it.
You'll see it.
And to me, it's conceivably unintended consequences of raise one issue and CPUC will say, okay, we'll increase your rates in order to deal with that issue.
Right.
You know, this is always the question of you know what solutions we're looking for, and it's not holding people to account. It's increased rates to deal with whatever the problem was because we couldn't deal with it. Anyway, we could talk forever about PG&E. Thank you everyone. Sorry for going a few minutes late. We will adjourn the meeting at 12:05 p.m.